All right, hello everyone. We are going to do this presentation. Please, Chandler, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name's Chandler,
And I'm Zach.
and today we will be presenting on Amakusa Shiro and the Shimabara Rebellion, as well as the concept of Christian martyrdom. This event is one of the most significant moments in the history of Christianity in Japan. We will discuss like who Amakusa Shiro was, what caused the rebellion, and what it was exactly, and why this event is so important in the history of Christianity in Japan.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to be talking about the importance of Amakusa Shiro to Christianity in Japan. I think it's important for us to first talk about the introduction of Christianity to Japan. Of course, we have been talking about this, I believe, from day one, or maybe not day one, but maybe class three. Since pretty much the beginning, we've been talking about this stuff. And I know we're all familiar with Francis Xavier, but it is important to remind everyone that does not remember. Francis Xavier in 1549 came to Japan with other missionaries from Portugal in order to spread Christianity. This was, of course, also important as in order to claim Japan as land for the missionaries, they had to spread Christianity as a religion. There were not entirely just religious motivators, but religion was the main focus of Francis Xavier. He and his missionaries spread Christianity around the Kyushu area. Um, we know that Nagasaki, because of Dejima, which was the artificial island created for uh, Portuguese and Dutch traders, um, they had a lot of Christians around Nagasaki. And we can also see that Christianity in the beginning was very efficient in being spread. It was only about 50 years after Xavier arrived in Japan that there were hundreds of thousands of people converted to Christianity, which is pretty dang fast. But because Christianity is a religion from a foreign country with a lot of different ideas about morality, um, gender roles, places in society, Christianity kind of held itself as a directly oppositional concept to Japan as it had identified itself in this period. And a lot of rulers, specifically the Tokugawa shogunate, saw Christianity as a threat, specifically to national security, and also the shogunate's grasp over the country as a government.
And because of these concerns that Zach was talking about from this previous slide, Japanese leaders began to restrict and eventually ban Christianity in Japan. The first of these rulers to do so was Toyotomi Hideyoshi, like we've talked about in class previously, and he began to restrict these things and these Christian missionaries in the late 1500s. Later, the Tokugawa shogunate took even stronger measures. Uh, in 1614, Tokugawa Ieyasu officially banned Christianity throughout all of Japan. Christians were forced to renounce their faith, and many missionaries were expelled from the country. Those who refused to abandon Christianity often faced torture, imprisonment, or execution. And because of these persecutions, many Christians were killed and eventually became martyrs for their belief.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for us to talk about before we get to the Shimabara Rebellion. As we can see, there is a persecution of Christians in Japan that was around, actually started before Amakusa Shiro was born. He was born into a samurai family that his father was a retainer for the Konishi clan, which is um, a daimyo clan that is specifically Catholic. For this reason, because Amakusa Shiro's father had died, he was raised in a Jesuit school. He was raised with Christianity, and even only at the age of 16 years old, he was seen as a very charismatic person that became a leader for the Shimabara Rebellion. And he was seen as someone with like divine guidance, similar to Abraham or Jesus, even. Um, I don't think he was worshipped so much as Jesus, but we can see that he was very important. And I'd also like to mention, with the introduction of Japan, seeing Christianity in 1549, 1621, which is about 80 years later, there was a pretty big gap of time in between Francis Xavier coming to Japan and Amakusa Shiro being born. This was uh, when Japan had started to have a lot more persecution of Christianity as a religion. It just so happened to match a prophecy or an idea that Francis Xavier had that 100 years after introduction of Catholicism to Japan, there would be persecution, and following there would be someone that would lead the people against this persecution. And it just so happened that people saw Amakusa Shiro as the person that would do this and uh, bring people against the Tokugawa shogunate, fight for Christianity.
Now, to talk a little bit more about what exactly caused the Shimabara Rebellion. Uh, the Shimabara Rebellion began in 1637 and it had both religious and economic causes. One major cause was the persecution of Christians, like we've been talking about, and many people in the region had previously converted to Christianity, but the government forced them to abandon their beliefs and punish those who refused. At the same time, the local population was also suffering from heavy taxation, famine, and poor living conditions. Local rulers imposed extremely high taxes on peasants, even during times of drought and crop failure. These conditions created widespread anger and desperation among the people. Eventually, many peasants and Christians decided to revolt against their local rulers.
Yeah, and the Shimabara Rebellion, I think something that's interesting, or maybe just sad, is that given that this is all so far in the past, we don't have exact numbers. It's really hard to collect. I mean, even in modern wars, collect a direct head count of who was there, what was going on. But with the Shimabara Rebellion, we don't know exactly how many people attended, participated. We know most of them were peasants, farmers, or women or children, which were not people granted a lot of social power, but they fought for themselves. Uh, Unfortunately, what we do know is that 37,000 rebels was actually the count of people that died. And they gathered at the Hara Castle, um, contesting the Tokugawa army, which had 120,000 soldiers or more, which is more than four times the amount of people rebelling. But they were able to keep it up for months and months with this war of attrition against the Tokugawa government. They had seized the castle, trying to hold people off, but eventually the government did get in and kill almost everyone there, including Amakusa Shiro, who was taken and beheaded, and his head was put onto a pike in order to scare away Christians. Um, so it was not very successful, unfortunately, and it was also a very brutal ending to the Shimabara Rebellion.
And then we move on to uh, a more interesting side from historians, and they begin to ask questions about like whether the rebels can truly be, or could they have truly have been considered Christian martyrs? Traditionally, a martyr is someone who dies because of their religious beliefs. Many of the rebels believed that dying for their faith would have led them to an eternal salvation. However, some people argue that the rebels should not be considered martyrs because of the use of violence and how many of them killed others during the rebellion. Because of this, historians continue to debate whether the Shimabara rebels should be more so remembered primarily as religious martyrs, political rebels, or a combination of both.
Yeah, and we can also see that uh, as there's this question of are these rebels considered martyrs, we can also see that this idea of martyrdom and people dying for Christianity, it shows that Christianity for people is a huge part of their identity that is worth dying for. It is inseparable from someone being a person. And at this time, there's a lot of difficulties in deciding for the Tokugawa government, can a Japanese person be Christian? The Tokugawas decide no, that cannot be the case because it feels to them that Japaneseness, Christianity are two separate ideas, just as Japaneseness and Westernness, which oversimplification, but we can see that there was a much larger amount of persecution after this. The next year after this rebellion ended, Portugal was completely removed from Japan. The Sakoku edicts were added, making this a more intense persecution on Christians. We can also see that Fumie, stepping on those Christian images and idols, was brought about, and Christians had to hide their identities, as we've talked about the Kakude Christians, which did become a separate religious identity at some different points, but generally Catholics had to decide whether they wanted to hide their identity or hide but still practice.
Mhm.
And there was kind of more of a push for Japan to become isolated and removing itself from any kind of identity that we can see as Western. Um, and yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for watching our presentation. I hope all of you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye bye. Let me end the recording. Okay, bye for real this time.
Yeah.